I thought I knew my wife until I found a bar napkin with another man's number in her purse. What started as suspicion became a nightmare of lies that went back decades. When I finally learned the truth about who she really was, it changed everything I believed about my own life. My name is Arthur Beaumont. I'm 43 years old. And until 6 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. Solid job as a financial analyst at Riverside Regional Bank. Beautiful wife. 13-year-old son who still thought I hung the moon. In a house in the suburbs that we'd been paying down for 8 years. The American dream, right? Wrong. The first sign something was off came on a Tuesday evening in March. Elise Valmont walked through her front door at 9:47 p.m., her heels clicking against the hardwood floor with more force than usual. She worked as a public relations specialist at Mercy General Hospital, so late nights weren't uncommon. But something felt different about this one. "Sorry I'm late," Elise called out, not bothering to look in my direction as she dropped her purse by the entrance. Her hair was slightly disheveled, not in the way it gets after a long day, but like someone had run their fingers through it. Crisis management meeting ran way over. I was sitting in the living room going over some loan portfolios from work, but I looked up when she spoke. "Everything okay at the hospital?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. "Just the usual drama," she replied, heading straight for the kitchen. Board members getting their knickers in a twist over the new cardiac wing budget. The phrase sounded rehearsed, like she practiced it in the car. Elise had been handling hospital PR for 7 years, and I'd never heard her use the term knickers in a twist before. It was a small thing, but it stuck with me. Julian was upstairs doing homework, and I could hear his music playing softly through the ceiling. At 13, he was starting to become more independent, but he still enjoyed our evening conversations about school and sports. Tonight, though, Elise seemed eager to avoid any family interaction. Julian finished his math homework. I told her as she poured herself a glass of wine. He wanted to show you his science project proposal. "Can it wait until tomorrow?" she asked, not turning around. "I'm exhausted." That was strike 2. Elise never postponed time with Julian. Even on her worst days, she'd at least peek into his room to say goodnight. But tonight, she seemed distracted, almost irritated by the mention of our son. I watched her move around the kitchen, and that's when I noticed the perfume. It wasn't her usual scent, the light floral one she'd worn for years. This was something heavier, muskier, and definitely not something she'd wear to a hospital meeting. "New perfume?" I asked, trying to sound conversational rather than suspicious. She paused for just a fraction of a second before answering. "Sabine gave me a sample of hers. Said I should try something different." Sabine was Elise's closest friend from work, a single woman in her 30s who had a reputation for being a bit wild. They'd been spending more time together lately. Girls' nights out that seemed to happen with increasing frequency. "Smells nice," I said, though, honestly, it didn't suit her at all. Elise finished her wine quickly and headed for the stairs. "I'm going to shower and go to bed," she announced. "Don't wait up." As I listened to her footsteps on the stairs and the bathroom door closing, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. The woman who just walked through our door felt like a stranger wearing my wife's face. The next morning brought more questions and answers. I woke up at 6:15, same as always, but Elise's side of the bed was already empty. The shower was running, which wasn't unusual, but when I checked the time, I realized she was up a full hour earlier than normal. "You're up early," I called through the bathroom door. "Early meeting today," came her muffled reply. "Some donors want to discuss the fundraising campaign." Another perfectly reasonable explanation that felt somehow off. In all my years at the bank, I'd learned to trust my instincts about inconsistencies, and my gut was telling me something wasn't adding up. After Elise left for work, I helped Julian get ready for school. My son was in 8th grade now, starting to show signs of the teenager he'd soon become, but he still enjoyed our morning conversations. "Dad, is everything okay with Mom?" Julian asked as I drove him to Jefferson Middle School. The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean, buddy?" "She seems different lately," he said, staring out the passenger window, like distracted or something, "and she's been going out a lot more with her friends." Kids see everything, even when we think we're being subtle. Adults go through phases sometimes, I told him, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. Your mom's just been busy with work. Okay, Julian replied, but he didn't sound convinced. After dropping him off, I sat in my car for a few minutes thinking about Elise's behavior over the past few weeks. The late nights, the new perfume, the secret phone calls. Each incident by itself could be explained away, but together they formed a pattern that made my chest tighten. At work, I found myself distracted during meetings, my mind wandering back to home. Around 11 o'clock, I decided to do something I'd never done before. I called the hospital to see if I could take Elise to lunch. I'm sorry, Mr. Beaumont, said the receptionist in the PR department. Elise called in sick today. Didn't she tell you? My blood went cold. All right, I managed to say, I forgot. Thanks. I hung up the phone and stared at my computer screen, not seeing the loan applications that needed my attention. Elise had left the house that morning in work clothes, carrying her briefcase, talking about an early meeting, but she called in sick. The logical part of my brain tried to find innocent explanations. Maybe she'd gotten sick after leaving the house. Maybe she'd gone to a doctor's appointment and didn't want to worry me. But the financial analyst in me knew that when the numbers don't add up, there's usually fraud involved. During my lunch break, instead of going to the cafeteria, I drove home. Elise's car wasn't in the driveway, which meant she was somewhere else doing something she'd felt the need to lie about. I sat in my car across the street from our house, feeling like a stranger in my own neighborhood. This wasn't the man I'd been yesterday morning. Yesterday, I was a trusting husband who took his wife's word at face value. Today, I was someone who checked up on his spouse's whereabouts. As I drove back to work, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to start paying closer attention, not because I wanted to catch Elise doing something wrong, but because I needed to understand what was happening to my family. The truth, whatever it was, couldn't be worse than this growing sense that the woman I'd been married to for 14 years was becoming someone I didn't recognize. That evening, I decided to test Elise's story. When she walked through the door at 7:30, I was waiting in the kitchen with a concerned expression I didn't have to fake. How are you feeling? I asked, walking over to feel her forehead. The hospital said you called in sick. For just a moment, Elise's eyes widened. Then she recovered, placing her hand over mine. I started feeling awful after I left this morning. Decided to see Dr. Fournier instead of spreading whatever bug I picked up. Dr. Fournier, I repeated. That was our family physician. Did he say what it was? Probably just stress, she replied, moving away from me toward the refrigerator. He suggested I take it easy for a few days. I pulled out my phone and called Dr. Fournier's office. The receptionist confirmed what I already suspected. Elise hadn't been there today. When I hung up, Elise was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, calculating. You call my doctor? She asked, her voice dangerously quiet. I was worried about you. I replied, keeping my tone steady. But apparently, you weren't there either. Arthur Beaumont. I don't appreciate being treated like a criminal in my own home. The formal use of my full name was a warning sign. Elise only did that when she was preparing for battle. Then stop acting like one. I shot back. Where were you today, Elise? And don't give me another story because I'm done pretending I believe them. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to know where I was? I was with Sabine and her friends at that new wine bar downtown. We were talking about how suffocating marriage can be. How some women feel trapped by husbands who think they own them. Sabine dared me to stand up to you more. Elise continued, her voice getting stronger. She said, I let you control everything. Where I go, who I see, what I do. And you know what? She was right. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Control you. Elise, asking where you were when you lied about being sick isn't controlling. It's basic honesty between married people. Is it? She challenged, stepping closer. Or is it because you can't stand the thought that I might have a life outside of this house? Outside of you and Julian. What I can't stand, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm, is being lied to by my wife. What I can't stand is wondering who the hell I'm married to. Julian appeared in the doorway, his face pale. Why are you guys yelling? Elise immediately shifted into mother mode. We're not yelling, honey, just having a discussion, but Julian wasn't buying it. At 13, He was old enough to recognize real conflict when he saw it. "Dad," he said, looking at me with confusion and worry. "Everything's fine, son," I told him, though we both knew it wasn't true. "Why don't you go finish your homework?" After Julian left, Elise and I stood in the kitchen staring at each other across a distance that felt much wider than the few feet of tile between us. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "No," I agreed. "It's not." The next morning, I did something I'd never done in 14 years of marriage. I checked our bank statements without telling Elise. What I found made my hand shake. Regular withdrawals of $500, sometimes $800, always in cash going back 3 months. Money taken from our joint savings account, the one we'd been building for Julian's college fund. Each withdrawal was made on days when Elise claimed to be working late or out with friends. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. I printed out the statements and spread them across my desk at the bank. My coworker Janet noticed my expression. "You look like someone who just discovered embezzlement," she said, half joking. "Something like that," I muttered. The total amount was staggering. $12,000 over 3 months. Money that should have been securing our son's future was disappearing into whatever secret life my wife was living. I called Julian's school and arranged to pick him up early. On the drive home, I asked him a question that had been bothering me. "Son, has your mom mentioned anyone new lately? Any friends I haven't met?" Julian was quiet for a moment. "There's this guy named Damien who called the house last week. Mom talked to him for like an hour, but when I asked who he was, she said it was work stuff." Damien, the name hit me like ice water. "Did she seem upset after the call?" "No," Julian said slowly. "She seemed happy, really happy, like happier than she's been in a while." That night, I confronted Elise with the bank statements. She was in our bedroom getting ready for another girls' night with Sabine. "Explain these," I said, dropping the papers on the dresser. Elise glanced at them, and I watched her face carefully. No surprise, no shock, just resignation. "I can explain," she said. "I'm listening." "What I think," I said, fighting to keep my voice level, "is that you've stolen $12,000 from our son's college fund to finance whatever you've been doing during your fake sick days and imaginary work emergencies." Elise sat down on the edge of the bed. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, she looked genuinely tired. "His name is Damien Moreau," she said quietly. "We used to be together before I met you. He's been having financial problems, and I've been helping him out." The admission was like a punch to the gut, but I forced myself to stay focused. "Helping him out with our money without telling your husband. It's complicated, Arthur." "No, it's not," I replied. "It's theft. And whatever relationship you had with this Damien, it clearly isn't over." Elise looked up at me then, and for a moment, I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with. But it was just a glimpse before the mask slipped back into place. "You're right," she said. "It's not over, and maybe it never really ended." After Elise's admission about Damien, I called my old college roommate, Mark Dubois, who worked as a private investigator. We met at a downtown diner the next morning. "Arthur, I wish you called me sooner," Mark said. "I've been watching this situation develop for months." His words hit me like a sledgehammer. "What do you mean?" "Damien Moreau isn't just some ex-boyfriend. He's Elise's first husband, common law, and they have a son together." The coffee cup slipped from my hands, shattering on the floor. "That's impossible. Elise told me her first child died during birth." "The death certificate was forged," Mark said quietly. "The boy's name is Hugo. He's 17 years old." My mind reeled. "How long have you known?" "About 6 months. I saw them together at a restaurant. The kid looks exactly like her." Mark leaned forward. "I should have told you immediately." 17 years of lies, I whispered. "The money she's been taking. It's child support. Hugo wants to go to college." I thought about Julian's depleted college fund. "I need proof. Everything you can find." "There's more," Mark continued. "Elise has been telling Damien that you're abusive, that she's afraid of you." The accusation was absurd. Anyone who knows me would never believe that. Damien believes it. So does Hugo. They think they're rescuing her. That afternoon, I found Elise packing a suitcase. She looked up defiantly when I entered our bedroom. "I'm staying with Sabine for a few days," she announced. "Actually," I said, closing the door, "you're going to tell me about Hugo." The color drained from her face. I don't know what you're talking about. Your 17-year-old son with Damien Morrow. The child you told me died at birth. Elise sank onto the bed, hands shaking. How did you find out? What matters is that you've built our entire marriage on a lie. She looked up with tears in her eyes. I was going to tell you when. After you'd stolen every penny for the child you abandoned. I didn't abandon him. Elise snapped. I made a choice to give him a better life. And then you chose to lie to me about it for 14 years. Mark's investigation revealed the full scope of Elise's deception. We met in his office 2 days later. The insurance fraud was the most damaging, Mark explained, showing me documents. She collected $50,000 on a fake death certificate, then used that money for your wedding. I stared at the evidence. Our entire relationship was funded by fraud. It gets worse. She's still married to Damien. Never divorced him. Your marriage is technically bigamy. The legal implications hit me. That means Julian is definitely your son biologically and legally. I ran a DNA test, but your marriage to Elise is void. That evening, I sat Julian down for the hardest conversation of my life. Dad, you look serious, Julian said, settling across from me. Son, I need to tell you some things about your mother and me that are going to be hard to understand. I explained gently that Elise had been lying, that she had another son he'd never met, and that she might be going away. Does this mean you're getting divorced? Julian asked. Our family is going to look different for a while, but you'll always be my son, and I'll always take care of you. Julian was quiet. Is this why she's been acting weird? Probably. Are you going to be okay, Dad? His maturity made my chest tighten. We're both going to be okay, buddy. I promise. 2 days later, Mark called with news that changed everything. The police want to talk to you about the insurance fraud. Elise is in custody. I felt relief and sadness. Relief that the lies were ending. Sadness that Julian would learn his mother was a criminal. What happens now? I asked. Now you focus on rebuilding your life. You and Julian, you're stronger than you know. As I hung up, I realized he was right. I was stronger than I'd known. Strong enough to face the truth, protect my son, and start over. The woman I thought I married never existed. But the man I became fighting for my family's future was real, and he was just getting started. 3 weeks after Elise's arrest, Mark called with news that would shatter what remained of my world. Arthur, you need to sit down for this, Mark said when he arrived at my house. Julian was at school, which was fortunate given what I was about to learn. I got the DNA results 3 weeks ago, he said grimly, pulling out a manila envelope. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you. Julian isn't your biological son. He's Damien's. I kept hoping I was wrong, so I ran the test 3 times. But Elise and I were together when she got pregnant. Apparently, she was with both of you. The timeline overlaps perfectly. Mark set the documents on my coffee table. Arthur, I'm sorry. I know how much that boy means to you. Julian wasn't just my son. He was my entire world. The thought of losing him was unbearable. Does this change anything legally? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Since you're listed on the birth certificate and have been his father for 13 years, you have parental rights. But if Damien finds out and decides to fight for custody, he won't find out, I said firmly. Not from me, not from you, not from anyone. Arthur, think about this carefully. Keeping this secret is exactly what I'm going to do, I interrupted. Julian is my son in every way that matters. Some DNA test isn't going to change that. That afternoon, I picked Julian up from school as usual. He got into the car with his typical teenage energy, talking about a science project and complaining about his math teacher. Dad, you're quiet today, he observed as we drove home. Just thinking about work stuff. I lied. Though the irony wasn't lost on me, I was becoming as good a deception as Elise had been. Are you still upset about Mom? Julian asked. The question was innocent, but it cut deep. I'm upset about the situation, not about your mom specifically. Do you think she'll come back home when this is all over? I pulled into our driveway and turned to look at my son, because that's what he was, biology aside. Julian, your mother made some serious mistakes. She's going to have to face the consequences of those choices. But she's still my mom, he said quietly. Yes, I agreed. She'll always be your mom, and I'll always be your dad. Nothing's going to change that. After dinner, I sat in my study staring at the DNA results. Mark had been thorough. There was no doubt about the paternity. But as I looked at the scientific evidence that Julian wasn't my biological child, I realized something important. I didn't care. I'd been there for his first steps, his first words, his first day of school. I taught him to ride a bike, helped him with homework, and held him when he was sick. Damien Moreau might have contributed DNA, but I contributed everything else. The next morning, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible a month ago. I called a lawyer to start adoption proceedings. If Julian wasn't legally mine through biology, then I'd make him legally mine through the courts. Given that you're already listed as the father on the birth certificate and have been raising him for 13 years, this should be straightforward, the lawyer explained, especially with the mother's legal troubles. What about the biological father? I asked. Since he's never been involved and has no legal standing, it shouldn't be an issue, but we'll need to notify him as part of the process. Absolutely not, I said firmly. There has to be another way. The lawyer looked uncomfortable. Mr. Beaumont, I understand your concerns, but legally. Find another way, I repeated. That man is not going to disrupt my son's life any more than it already has been. As I left the lawyer's office, I realized I was willing to fight anyone, including the legal system, to protect my relationship with Julian. Biology might determine genetics, but love and commitment determine family. And Julian was my family, regardless of what any DNA test said. Elise's trial was set to begin in 6 weeks, but she was released on bail pending the proceedings. I wasn't surprised when she showed up at my door on a Tuesday evening, though I was prepared for her. I want to see Julian, she said without preamble. That's not going to happen, I replied, not moving from the doorway. He's my son, Arthur. You can't keep him from me. The irony of her statement wasn't lost on me, given what I now knew about Julian's paternity. You lost the right to make demands when you built our entire marriage on fraud. I made mistakes, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm his mother. No, it doesn't. But it changes everything else. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. Julian doesn't need to see you right now. He's been through enough. You're poisoning him against me, Elise accused. I haven't said a word against you to Julian. I didn't need to. Your actions spoke louder than I ever could. Elise's expression hardened. You think you're so righteous, don't you? Well, let me tell you something about your precious son that might change your perspective. My blood went cold. Somehow, she found out about the DNA results. Julian isn't yours, she continued, watching my face for a reaction. He's Damien's. You've been raising another man's child for 13 years. I know, I said simply. The admission clearly surprised her. You know? How can you say that? He's not your blood. He's my son in every way that matters. Blood doesn't make a family, Elise. Love and commitment do. 2 things you clearly don't understand. Elise stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. You're going to keep him, aren't you? Even knowing the truth. There is no keeping him. He's already mine. Has been since the day he was born. Damien has rights, she said desperately. When he finds out. He's not going to find out, I interrupted. Because you're not going to tell him. If you do, I'll make sure every detail of your insurance fraud gets national media attention. Your son Hugo will get to read all about his criminal mother in the newspapers. It was a bluff, but Elise didn't know that. Her face went pale. You wouldn't do that to Hugo. Try me, I said. You want to play games with my family? I'll play harder than you ever imagined. Elise took a step back. I never meant for things to get this complicated, but they did. And now you have to live with the consequences. I moved toward the door. Stay away from Julian, Elise. If you love him at all, let him heal from what you've already put him through. And if I don't stay away, I turned back to face her. Then you'll discover just how far I'm willing to go to protect my son. After she left, I went inside to find Julian doing homework at the kitchen table. He looked up when I entered. Was that Mom? He asked. Yes. What did she want? To see you. I told her it wasn't a good time. Julian nodded slowly. Thanks, Dad. I'm not ready to see her yet. Take all the time you need, buddy. There's no rush. As I watched my son return to his homework, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in months. The truth about his paternity didn't change how I felt about him. If anything, it made me more determined to be the father he deserved. Biology might have connected him to Damien Moreau, but 13 years of love had connected him to me, and that bond was stronger than any DNA test could measure. 6 months after Elise's arrest, the legal proceedings finally concluded. She pleaded guilty to insurance fraud and received 3 years probation with community service. More importantly for me, the adoption papers for Julian were approved without contest. Congratulations, Mr. Beaumont, the judge said as she signed the final documents. Julian is now legally your adopted son. I looked over at Julian, who was sitting beside me in his best suit. At 14 now, he understood the significance of this moment better than most kids his age would. Does this mean Mom can't take me away? He asked quietly. No one can take you away from me now, buddy. We're officially family. The irony wasn't lost on me. DNA had tried to separate us, but the law had brought us back together. Sometimes the system actually works. Mark was waiting for us outside the courthouse. How does it feel to be officially a father? He asked, shaking my hand. The same as it felt before, I replied, because nothing really changed except the paperwork. Over the past 6 months, Julian and I had grown closer than ever. Without Elise's drama consuming our lives, we developed new routines, new traditions. He'd started calling me Dad more often, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Hugo had reached out twice, wanted to meet his half-brother. I declined both times, not out of spite, but because Julian wasn't ready. Maybe someday they'd have a relationship, but it would be on Julian's terms, not because of anyone else's agenda. What about the college fund? Julian asked as we drove home. I'd managed to recover most of the stolen money through Elise's restitution payments. It's all there, plus interest. You'll be able to go to any college you want. What if I want to stay close to home? Then you stay close to home. Your choice, son. That evening, we celebrated with pizza and a movie. Just the two of us. Simple, peaceful, normal. Everything our lives hadn't been for months. Dad, Julian said during the credits. Yeah, I'm glad you found out the truth about everything, even though it was hard. Why is that? Because now I know you really want me here. Not because you have to, but because you choose to. His insight amazed me constantly. How do you figure? The way you fought for me. Like you had to prove you deserved to keep me. Maybe I did have to prove it to myself, if not to anyone else. Well, you did. Prove it. I mean, we sat in comfortable silence for a while, just enjoying each other's company. Dad, Julian said eventually. Yes, son. Thank you. For what? For choosing me. Even when you found out about, the DNA stuff. I never told him about the paternity results, but somehow he'd figured it out. Kids are more perceptive than we give them credit for. Julian, listen to me carefully, I said, turning to face him. You are my son, not because of genetics, not because of legal papers, but because we chose each other. That's what real family is. I love you, Dad. I love you too, son. As I tucked him into bed that night, I realized something profound. Elise's lies had nearly destroyed us, but they'd also given us something unexpected, absolute certainty about what really mattered. Julian was my son, not because of biology, but because biology didn't matter. We had chosen each other, fought for each other, and built something stronger than DNA could ever create. The woman who tried to tear us apart had instead made us unbreakable. 1 year later, I stood in the kitchen of our renovated house, watching Julian help his friend with homework at the dining room table. We had changed everything about our living space, removing all traces of Elise's deception and creating something that was purely ours. The settlement from the insurance company had been generous enough to pay for the renovations and fully restore Julian's college fund. More importantly, it had given us a fresh start. Dad, can Felix stay for dinner? Julian called out. Of course, I replied. I'm making your favorite anyway. Cooking had become one of my unexpected talents over the past year. Julian and I had learned together, turning meal preparation into quality time rather than a chore. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark. Elise completed her community service, moving to another state to be closer to Hugo. Thought you should know. I deleted the message without responding. Elise's chapter in our lives was closed, and I had no interest in reopening it. Mr. Beaumont, Felix said when I brought them snacks. Julian's lucky to have a dad like you. I'm the lucky one, I replied, meaning every word. Later that evening, after Felix went home, Julian and I sat on the back porch talking about his plans for high school next year. He wanted to join the debate team and maybe try out for baseball. You know what's funny? Julian said, looking up at the stars. What's that? I used to worry that I wasn't good enough to be your son. Now I know you weren't sure you were good enough to be my dad. His insight amazed me constantly. How do you figure? The way you fought for me. Like you had to prove you deserved to keep me. Maybe I did have to prove it to myself if not to anyone else. Well, you did. Prove it. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, just enjoying each other's company. Dad, Julian said eventually. Yes, son. Thank you. For what? For choosing me. Even when you found out about, the DNA stuff. I never told him about the paternity results, but somehow he'd figured it out. Kids are more perceptive than we give them credit for. Julian, listen to me carefully, I said, turning to face him. You are my son, not because of genetics, not because of legal papers, but because we chose each other. That's what real family is. I love you, Dad. I love you too, son. As we headed inside for the night, I reflected on how much our lives had changed. The lies and betrayal that had nearly destroyed us had instead revealed what truly mattered. Trust, commitment, and unconditional love. These were the foundations of real family. Biology was just genetics. What Julian and I had built together was so much stronger than that. We'd survived Elise's deception and emerged better for it. We were no longer a family held together by assumptions and convenience. We were a family forged by choice and strengthened by adversity. And that was worth more than any DNA test could ever measure.